It started with a sentence, not even a full one, really, just a half-mumbled, stumbling excuse for the truth. We had to use it, Lily. You don't understand. I didn't understand. Not then, not fully. But I felt it, like the floor shifting. Beneath me, subtly at first, then violently. It was a summer evening, warm and too quiet. The kind of quiet that prickles your skin because something isn't right. I stood in the kitchen, still holding the edge of the counter like it might hold me back from falling into something I couldn't climb out of. You mean the college fund? I said, though I already knew. Mum avoided my eyes. Dad exhaled like he'd been waiting for this conversation to end before it even began. It was for Emma, her course. Was more important than mine? I cut in. They didn't answer. That was answer enough. I tried to do the math in my head. Years of saving. The birthdays I skipped parties to revise. The weekends I worked part-time while Emma floated in and out of hobbies like she was trying on personalities. I'd said no to so many things. Because I thought, stupidly maybe, that this was the plan. That if I kept my head down and did everything right, it would all pay off. Instead, it had paid for someone else. You could reapply next year, Dad offered, his voice flat, like we were talking about train delays. Mum looked hopeful. Maybe take a gap year, work a little, travel. It's not the end of the world, love. But it felt like it. It was the end of a world. My world. The one I'd built in my head every time I said no, every time I told myself, later, you'll get your turn. I kept thinking someone would step in, say, wait, we made a mistake. You matter too? No one did. I went upstairs and closed the door. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my suitcase. It was still there from our trip last month. I hadn't unpacked. I never liked unpacking. I liked the idea of being ready to leave. It's strange what betrayal sounds like. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's soft. It's quiet. It wears the voice of people. You love telling you that your dreams can wait because someone else's dreams can't. I didn't sleep that night. I wrote instead. Wrote everything I wanted to say, but wouldn't. Everything that burned too deep to speak out loud. Then I folded the page and slid it into my journal. I didn't realize it yet, but that was the last night I'd live in that house. The last time I'd try to be the girl who waited. By morning, the air was thick with normalcy. Mum was in the kitchen humming to the radio like she hadn't torn something vital out of me the night before. Dad had already left for work. Emma was still asleep upstairs, probably dreaming of Freshers Week and dorm room Pinterest boards. I made tea, out of habit mostly. My hands were steady, but something inside me wasn't. I kept waiting for someone to say it was a mistake, that they'd talked through the night and changed their minds. But no one did. No one ever does. Mum looked up from her toast when I walked in. You okay? I nodded. I didn't smile. I know this is hard, she said cautiously, but things will work out. You'll see. I wanted to scream, not because she didn't care, but because she thought that was enough. She thought kindness after the fact was a balm for betrayal. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it sat too lightly on her. She still believed I'd understand. That, I'd fold, like always. I'm going out for a bit, I said. All right, love. That was it. No questions, no suspicion. I could have been going for a walk or a coffee. In truth, I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I was leaving. I'd packed light. One bag, the important things, my journal, my laptop, some money I'd saved from tutoring, a scarf Gran had given me that still smelled faintly, of her perfume, and a photo. One of the three of us before Emma was born, Mum, Dad, and me when things felt simple, before sacrifice became expectation. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them that. I got on the train without looking back. The station was mostly empty, just the odd traveler with too much luggage or not enough sleep. I fit right in. The doors slid shut with a soft hiss, and suddenly the world was moving, and I wasn't stuck anymore. It wasn't dramatic. No storm, no tears, no swelling music. Just the rhythmic clatter of tracks and the quiet in my chest finally making sense. I watched fields blur into towns, towns into city. And I kept thinking, this is what it feels like to choose yourself. Not just once, but finally. By the time the train pulled into the city, I had no real plan, just instinct and a pulse that felt louder than it had in weeks. I didn't know where I'd sleep that night, or what job I'd find. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going home. Not until I had something they couldn't take from me, something they'd have no say in. The first night wasn't glamorous. Hostels smell like shared air and borrowed time. My room had 4 bunk beds, 1 flickering ceiling light, and a girl from Manchester who'd already claimed the only working plug socket with her curling iron. I took the top bunk by the window, pulled my scarf over my face, and pretended the draft was just a breeze. It wasn't fear I felt. Not exactly. It was something sharper, alertness, maybe. Every sound was louder. The hum of traffic outside, the rustle of sheets, the sharp cough of someone down the corridor. It felt like the city was introducing itself in whispers, waiting to see if I'd last. The morning came gray and wet, like the city couldn't be, bothered with a proper welcome. I took that personally for about 2 seconds before reminding myself I wasn't here for sunshine. I spent the day walking. There's something about moving your body when your brain won't stop. I wandered through streets I didn't know the names of, watched people who didn't see me, listened to the noise of a place where no one knew me as anyone's daughter, anyone's sister, just Lily. Or rather, just me. It was terrifying. And kind of wonderful. I found a corner cafe with cheap tea and Wi-Fi. I scrolled job listings like it was a game I didn't know the rules to. Admin roles, barista gigs, tutoring. I messaged a few contacts from school, the kind of people who always knew someone who knew someone. I wasn't above asking for help. I just needed to do it on my own terms. No pity, no drama. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Not my parents, not Emma, not even Maya, who'd once sworn she'd be the Thelma to my Louise. I knew what telling people would invite. Concern, advice, guilt. I couldn't afford any of those things right now. Later that day, I got a reply from a tutoring agency. One of those urgent start situations, maths and English for GCSE students. Decent pay, flexible hours. I nearly cried in the middle of the cafe, not because it was my dream job, but because it was a start, a foothold, something to anchor me. That night, I returned to the hostel with a sandwich and a plan. I booked the bed for another week. Not forever, just long enough to figure out the next step. I opened my laptop and wrote a to-do list like it was a sacred ritual. Get through the week, save everything, find a room to rent, breathe. No one tells you how quiet beginnings are. There's no fanfare, no dramatic monologue, just a girl on a bunk bed drinking lukewarm tea from a takeaway cup, determined not to be forgotten. Not by the world, not by herself. I never imagined tutoring would keep me afloat, but it did. 3 days a week turned into 5. 1 student turned into 4. The kids were all so different, some quiet, some angry, some distracted, but none of them looked at me like I was broken. To them, I was just the person who made Shakespeare less unbearable or algebra less cruel. I liked that, being useful without having to explain myself. I found a room in a flat above a florist. The woman who owned it, Marian, reminded me of my grandmother. Sharp eyes, loud laugh, endless stories. She let the place to me cheap because I looked honest. I didn't correct her. I hadn't lied, exactly. I just hadn't told the whole truth, like how I'd left home with no plan, like how my family didn't even know where I was. The room was small, but it was mine. I painted one wall a deep blue, stuck up postcards from places I'd never been, and stacked my books in piles by the window. There was a kind of peace in it, a life that didn't scream or demand, just breathed quietly beside me. I worked. I saved. I studied at night, brushing up on courses I'd abandoned when the college fund disappeared. I didn't tell myself it was revenge anymore. I told myself it was survival, becoming the version of me I should have always been allowed to be. I thought about them. My parents, Emma, not every day, but often enough. I wondered if they missed me, if they regretted it, if they even realized that what they took from me wasn't just money, it was trust. It was the belief that I mattered, too. Sometimes guilt would sneak in late at night, wearing my mother's voice. "You're being dramatic. Emma needed it more. You'll be fine." And for a second, I'd ache. But then I'd remember the silence in their eyes when I cried, the way they looked at me like I was the problem for wanting something of my own. I wasn't angry all the time. That was the surprising part. The anger faded into something else, something colder and steadier. Purpose. I didn't need to prove anything to them, but I would prove it to myself. By the end of the year, I was no longer just surviving, I was choosing. I applied for a business program. I picked up freelance work helping small shops with social media and websites. I said yes to things, said no when it mattered. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Built brick by brick with no handouts, no apologies, and no one expecting me to shrink for their comfort. And that, more than anything, made me feel alive. It was a Tuesday, just after lunch. The kind of day that felt like it could go on forever. I was in my flat, sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers, my laptop, and a pile of coffee cups. I was just starting to dig into the social media strategy for a local restaurant when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. I didn't recognize the voice on the other end. "Lily?" It was a woman's voice, strained but warm. "This is Emma. I don't know if you'll even answer this, but we need to talk." I froze. My stomach dropped to my feet. I hadn't heard from Emma in over 2 years. Not a text, not a call, nothing. And now here she was, sounding like she'd just stepped into my life again, like nothing had ever happened. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. I didn't know if I was more angry or just scared. Maybe both. I don't know how to say this, but Mom and Dad, they've gotten into some trouble. Financial trouble. Serious trouble, she said, her words tumbling out like she was desperate for me to understand something before it was too late. "They've been hiding it from you for months. I think they're... Why are you calling me?" My voice was sharp, the words falling out before I could stop them. "You left. You and Mom and Dad, you all left me behind. Don't pretend this is about anything else." There was silence on the other end, heavy and thick. Then a quiet, almost broken, "I know, and I'm sorry. But it's not about the past, Lily. They need you. We need you." I laughed, bitter. "Need me? Really? After everything? Now you need me?" I know it's a lot to ask, but they're trying to fix things. They're trying to make it right. Please just come home. I don't know what else to do. They're falling apart. I leaned back against the wall, running my fingers through my hair, trying to breathe. Every instinct in me screamed to hang up, to walk away from it all. But something inside me, the part I didn't recognize, wanted to know. Wanted to hear what they had to say, even if it meant facing everything I'd worked so hard to escape. "Where are they?" I asked, my voice softer now. The words felt like a betrayal. To myself, to everything I'd built. But they were out there, hanging between us like a thread. "Just come home, please. I'll explain everything. I promise." The call ended, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart was still pounding, in my chest. A million thoughts hit me all at once, and none of them made any sense. Was I really considering this? After everything they'd taken from me, the life they robbed from me, without a second thought? But then I thought about the quiet nights in my flat, the loneliness that had crept up on me when I least expected it. My pride told me to stay angry, to stay away. But my heart, it just wanted answers. It wanted closure. Maybe deep down, it wanted a family again. Even if it wasn't the family I'd left behind. I didn't know what to do, not yet. But it was clear. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. The drive felt longer than it should have. Every mile between me and that place, the house, the town, the people I used to call family, pulled on me like an anchor I couldn't shake off. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. I'd built a new life, a new identity, far from everything that had once defined me. The woman I'd become didn't fit into the life I'd left behind. Yet, here I was, driving back to it. The town hadn't changed. The same coffee shop, the same little grocery store, even the same street signs. The familiarity of it all was suffocating. I could already feel the old ghosts stirring. The memories of long summers spent in the garden, the sounds of my father's laughter drifting up the stairs, and the constant hum of my mother's voice calling me for dinner. Back then, it had felt so simple, so safe. But now, it felt like a trap. When I pulled into the driveway, the house stood there, just as I remembered it. Too big for the three of us, too empty for the family I thought we were. I had no idea what I was walking into, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't going to be a warm welcome. Not after everything. I didn't even have to ring the doorbell. As soon as I stepped out of the car, the front door opened, and there was Emma, looking like she hadn't aged a day. But she did. I could see it in her eyes. The exhaustion, the worry. She wasn't the carefree sister I'd left behind. "Lily," she said, her voice hesitant. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but said nothing. The words felt too heavy, like they would crush the moment before it even began. "I know you're angry," Emma continued, her voice cracking a little. "But please, just come inside. Mom and Dad, they need to see you. We all need you." I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't sure if I even needed to be here. But I walked past her anyway, stepping over the threshold that had once been my home. Inside, everything was as I remembered. Too much so. The old family portraits hung on the walls, the same worn-out couch sat in the living room, and the smell of my mother's cooking wafted from the kitchen. Even though I knew she wasn't the one cooking anymore. My father was the first to stand when he saw me. There was a moment, just a moment, where everything felt like it could go back to normal. But then I saw his face. The weariness in his eyes, the tightness in his jaw. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the weight of all the things he'd hidden from me had finally caught up with him. "Lily," he said, his voice almost a whisper. I'm sorry. For everything." I couldn't respond. My throat felt tight, my mouth dry. The anger that had simmered for so long began to rise again, but I swallowed it down. There were too many questions now. Too many things I didn't understand. And I needed answers before I could even think about forgiveness. "Mum's upstairs," Emma said, breaking the silence. She's not well, Lily. I think you should see her." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I wasn't sure if I was ready for any of this. As I made my way up the stairs, the memories flooded back, each one hitting me like a wave. The last time I'd been here, I'd been angry, devastated. Now, I wasn't sure what I was. But I knew one thing. I was no longer the girl who had left this house behind. The person I'd become didn't fit in here anymore. But maybe, just maybe, I could figure out how to make it work. When I reached the top of the stairs, I hesitated for just a second before knocking on the door. "Lily?" Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Is that you?" I pushed the door open slowly, and there she was. My mother. She looked so much smaller than I remembered. There were lines on her face now, gray in her hair. She was nothing like the woman I'd left behind. "Hello, Mum," I said quietly, my voice thick. Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to fix everything I broke." My mother's eyes, wet with unshed tears, were all too familiar. They reminded me of the woman who used to kiss my forehead before I went to sleep, who tucked me in every night with a warmth that now seemed so distant. But this woman, the one sitting before me, was a stranger. The years, the lies, the absence had changed her, and they had changed me too. "I don't understand," I said, my voice steady but filled with disbelief. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Her hands shook as she reached for mine, the desperation in her touch a silent plea. "Lily, I didn't want this. You have to believe me. We never meant for you to feel abandoned." Then why? Why didn't you tell me? My voice broke. I hadn't meant for it to, but the words had escaped before I could stop them. The pain was raw, too real. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered, her voice trembling. When your father lost his job, everything started to unravel. We couldn't afford both your tuition and Emma's. She was already struggling with her own future, and I couldn't bear to see her lose the chance you had. It wasn't fair, Lily. We chose her. But only because I thought you'd understand. You were always the strong one, the one who could take care of herself. I sat there in silence, the weight of her words pressing on me like a stone. Was that it? Was I just the one who could take care of herself? Was that the justification? Did you ever think about what I needed? What I wanted? I asked, my words sharper now, more deliberate. You took away my future to give it to Emma, and I never even had a say in it. I'm so sorry, she said again, the tears falling freely now. But I couldn't bear to watch Emma struggle the way you did. I wanted her to have the chance I couldn't give you. I thought if I could just fix one thing for her, it would make up for all the things we couldn't do for you. And what about me? I repeated, my voice rising. What about the dreams I had, the future I wanted to build? You think I'm just some backup plan? Something you could lean on when it got too hard? Her face crumpled in guilt. No, that's not it. I never meant for you to feel like that. But I didn't know how to fix things. We were desperate, Lily. Desperate. And in that desperation, I made a choice. A terrible, selfish choice. The room was thick with tension. I could feel the years of resentment, anger, and loss hanging in the air between us. We hadn't spoken like this in years, not since I left. And I could see it now, the depth of her regret, the weight of the years she had spent trying to carry, a burden that wasn't hers alone to bear. I didn't know how to fix it, she repeated, as if the words could somehow patch up the damage. But they couldn't. Nothing could. The damage had been done. The trust had been broken. And it wasn't something I could just sweep under the rug and forget. I wanted to give you the world, Lily, she whispered, her voice hoarse. But I didn't know how. And now, I don't know if I can. The silence between us felt endless. I stared at her, at the woman who had once been my rock, the one I had looked up to without question. And now, all I felt was betrayal. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the years of silence, the secrets that had kept us apart. I have to go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't do this right now. My mother's face crumbled, but I didn't stay to comfort her. I couldn't. I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who ran to her mother when the world fell apart. I had to be the woman who stood on her own. As I turned and walked out of the room, I felt the weight of her gaze on me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. Not until I'd figured out how to navigate the space between us, how to rebuild the pieces of myself that had shattered. As I descended the stairs, Emma was waiting for me. She looked up at me with that familiar, hopeful expression, the same one I remembered from all those years ago. The sister who had always needed me. But now I wasn't sure if I needed her, or if I even knew how to be the sister she wanted me to be. I don't know what to do anymore, Lily, Emma said, her voice small, vulnerable. I thought if we could just fix things with Mum, we could fix everything. But I don't know. I don't know how to fix us. I don't know either, I said quietly, but I'm not sure we can fix this. Not anymore. The air felt thicker than it ever had before, as though the weight of all the years, all the unspoken things had finally come to rest between me and Emma. I could feel the distance between us growing, widening, with every second I spent in that room, the sister I once shared everything with, the late-night talks, the secrets, the laughter, now felt like a stranger. We had both changed, but not in ways that could be easily reconciled. I never asked for any of this, Lily, Emma said, her voice shaking. I didn't want things to be like this. But Mum always made it so clear that I needed to be the one to get it right. I didn't ask for her to sacrifice your future. I didn't ask for any of it. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell at her for everything she'd been oblivious to, for the life that she'd been handed while I was left to pick up the pieces. But as her eyes met mine, there was something in them that softened my anger, a flicker of guilt, regret. She hadn't chosen this path any more than I had. I know you didn't, I said, my voice quieter now. But I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the fact that none of us were ever allowed to have a voice in this. It was always about what Mum wanted, what she thought was best. But she didn't think about what was best for me, for us. Emma shifted, her gaze dropping to the floor. I don't know how to make it right. I don't know if we can go back to what we were. I don't think I even know what that is anymore. You can't just go back, I said, the words coming out more bitter than I'd intended. You don't just get to pick up where you left off when everything's been broken. You can't glue the cracks back together and expect it to be the same. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could hear the distant hum of the world outside, but in that moment, the world inside the house seemed so small, so confined. I had wanted to go home, to be with family again, to find something that felt familiar, like the comfort of my old room. But this wasn't home. Not anymore. You don't have to fix it, I continued, my voice steadier now. You don't have to fix me. I'm done trying to fix everything. I've spent so long trying to piece together a future that felt like mine, but I've never been allowed to claim it. And now it's too late. Emma's eyes brimmed with tears again. Please don't shut me out, Lily. I'm trying. I'm really trying to understand, but I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to fix you. The words hit me harder than I expected. Fix me? Was that what I had become? A broken thing that needed to be fixed? It stung, more than it should have, because I had spent so long trying to rebuild myself, on my own terms. But now, in the face of her vulnerability, I was reminded of everything I had lost. Of the girl I used to be, the girl I didn't recognize anymore. I'm not broken, Emma, I said, the words cutting through the silence. I'm not something that needs to be fixed. I'm just different now. And maybe that's the hardest part of all. I'm not the person you remember. I'm not the person I used to be either. I'm someone new. Someone who's had to fight for every step, for everything. Emma didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a step back, as though trying to process what I'd said. There was a certain heaviness in her expression, one that mirrored my own. I know you're angry, she said after a moment, her voice soft. But I don't want us to be strangers. I don't want to lose you, Lily. I don't know how to fix things with Mum, but I want to fix things with you. I don't want us to be distant. I took a deep breath, the weight of the conversation settling heavily on my chest. I don't know if we can fix anything, but I don't think it's about fixing things anymore. It's about learning how to live with what we have left. Emma nodded slowly, the tears in her eyes not falling. This time, they stayed there, suspended, as though she were holding herself back from something, from breaking down, from everything falling apart. I don't want to lose you, Lily, she repeated. I just don't want to be alone. You're not alone, I said, finally stepping closer. We're just different, and that's okay. We're both still here, but we have to be honest with each other. We have to stop pretending like everything can go back to how it was. For a moment, Emma didn't speak, just looked at me, her eyes searching, pleading for something more. But there was nothing more to say. Not yet. I'm going to need time, I said quietly. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. I turned to walk away, but before I did, I felt Emma's hand on my arm. Her touch was tentative, almost unsure, but it was there. I don't know how we move forward from this, she whispered, but I want to try. I looked at her one last time, then nodded. So do I. As I left the room, I could still feel her gaze on me, but I wasn't sure anymore if that gaze was one of hope or resignation. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered now was that we had both said what needed to be said, no matter how hard it was to hear. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if we could ever really go back to being sisters again, or if we were too far gone to find our way back to each other. I couldn't sleep, not in that house, not with the tension hanging in the air like a cloud waiting to burst. The bed felt too familiar, too small, as though I could never fit in the life that used to belong to me. The sound of the house settling, creaking, groaning, reminded me of all the things we had avoided for too long. My parents' voices, muffled from downstairs, didn't offer any comfort, no warmth, no reassurance. They were just words. Empty words. The memories I'd buried deep inside me, the ones I thought I could leave behind, kept resurfacing. The way they looked at me when I was younger, like I was supposed to be everything they'd imagined for me. The way their expectations had crushed me, shaped me into someone I wasn't sure I even recognized anymore. And yet, here I was, back in the place where it all began, trying to find something that was lost. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood, the coldness of the wooden floor creeping through the soles of my feet. I needed space. I needed air. I needed to think. I quietly stepped into the hallway, careful not to wake anyone, and made my way down the stairs. The living room was dark, but the faint glow of a lamp from the kitchen beckoned me. I moved towards it, drawn by the quiet hum of the refrigerator, a sound that used to be so comforting. Now, it just reminded me of the hollow emptiness that filled the house. I found my father sitting at the kitchen table, his back to me, staring at a half-drunk cup of coffee, his hands clasped tightly together. He didn't hear me come in. It had been years since I'd seen him like this, so still, so distant, so defeated. "Dad?" I said softly, my voice barely a whisper in the quiet room. He looked up slowly, as if unsure who had spoken at first. His eyes softened when he saw me, but they didn't light up the way they used to. "Lily," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Couldn't sleep?" I shook my head, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "No, I just needed some air. Needed to clear my head." He nodded, as if he understood, though I knew he didn't. No one really did. Not fully. He sighed, pushing the cup of coffee aside before running a hand through his graying hair. "I've been thinking about everything, about how things turned out. I never wanted it to be like this. I didn't want you to feel betrayed." The words stung, as though he were trying to justify everything, to make it sound as though he hadn't made choices that left me shattered. I wasn't sure if it was the right time to say anything, to let him know just how much his actions had cost me, how much I'd lost in the process. "You didn't have a choice," I said quietly, my voice laced with a bitterness I couldn't quite hide. "Neither of you did. You did what you thought was right. But that doesn't make it right, Dad." He winced at the words, his eyes flickering with a pain I hadn't expected to see there. "I know," he said quietly. "I know, Lily. I know we made a mess of things. But the one thing I need you to understand is that it was never about you. It was about survival, for all of us." "Survival?" I repeated, my voice rising a little. "Is that what you call it? Sacrificing my future for Emma's?" "I didn't want to make that choice," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But your mother, she couldn't bear the thought of Emma missing out on the opportunities she never had. I thought..." He paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I thought we could make it work. That we could still give you both everything you deserved." "But you didn't," I said, the words coming out sharp like knives. "You didn't give me anything. You gave her everything, and I was just supposed to be okay with that." Well, I wasn't. I couldn't be. And that's why I left. I felt the weight of the silence between us grow heavy, suffocating. My father didn't speak for a long time. His shoulders slumped as though the burden of the years finally caught up with him. "I'm sorry, Lily," he finally whispered. "I'm sorry for all of it." I wanted to shout at him, to tell him how wrong he had been, how the lies they'd told themselves had only made things worse, but the words felt trapped, tangled in my throat. Instead, I simply nodded. What else was there to say? "I've been trying to move forward," I said softly, "but I'm not sure I can do that while still carrying everything from the past. I don't know how to fix what's broken." "Neither do I," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "But we can try, Lily. We can try to find a way forward. Together." For a moment, I just stood there, looking at him. I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't know if I wanted to. But in that moment, I realized something important. Sometimes, the past can't be fixed. Not really. And maybe it wasn't about fixing it. Maybe it was about finding a way to live with it. The next few days passed in a haze, each one blending into the next as I tried to adjust to being back in the house. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this disconnected from everything. I knew. The house was the same, yet it felt different, almost foreign now. The familiar creaks of the floorboards seemed more intrusive than comforting. The worn-out couch where we used to sit together as a family now seemed like a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I found myself avoiding my parents more and more. They tried to speak to me, to patch things up, but every time they did, I felt like they were asking for forgiveness before they'd really acknowledged how much they'd hurt me, and I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Not yet. On the fourth day, I received a call from Emma. I hadn't heard from her in a while. We'd exchanged a few texts when I first left, but it had been months since we'd spoken at length. She was always the one who reached out first, always the one who wanted to keep in touch, even when I couldn't bear the thought of talking to her. "Lily." Her voice was as bright as I remembered, but I could hear the undercurrent of uncertainty in it. "I was wondering if you were free. Mom and Dad are worried about you, and I thought maybe we could talk." I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure how to respond. There was so much I wanted to say, so many things I hadn't yet told her, but I wasn't sure she would understand. Not fully, not the way I needed her to. "Lily?" Emma's voice brought me back to the present. "Are you there?" "Yeah," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I'm here." "Good. I've been thinking about you a lot. About everything that's happened. I know Mom and Dad are trying to make things right, but I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if they even understand what they've done." I leaned back against the wall, the phone pressed to my ear. I had always known that Emma was sensitive to the tension between us, even when we were younger. She could feel the cracks in the family, just as I could. But she never let on, never wanted to admit it. "I don't think they do," I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I don't think they ever will, Emma. I don't think they understand just how much they took from me, and I don't know if I can forgive them for that." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear Emma shifting, probably trying to find the right words, but I wasn't sure she could. How could she? She had always been the golden child, the one who got everything, the one who didn't have to fight for what she wanted. I wasn't jealous of her. I just resented the fact that she was always shielded from the harsh realities I had to face. "Lily, I know this is hard," she said quietly, "but maybe you're looking at it wrong. Maybe Mom and Dad didn't mean to hurt you. Maybe they just didn't know how to balance everything." I let out a dry laugh, though there was no amusement in it. "I don't think it's that simple, Em. They made a choice, and they chose her. I was an afterthought." Her voice faltered, the words not quite coming out the way she wanted them to. "I don't think they saw it that way. I don't think they thought they were taking anything from you. They just wanted to give me a chance. They thought they were doing what was best." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink in. I could hear the guilt in her voice, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt for herself or for me. Either way, it didn't matter. The truth was, I wasn't sure I could ever trust them again. "I know you're trying to make sense of this," I said slowly, "but there's nothing to make sense of. They made a choice, and it wasn't me. And I don't know how to get past that." Emma was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more tentative. Do you think there's any chance we could fix things? I mean, we're family, right? Don't families work through stuff like this? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that things could be fixed, that I could go back to being the person I used to be, the sister she needed. But I wasn't sure I could. I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to being the person who waited for permission to be herself. I don't know, Em, I whispered. I really don't know. She didn't say anything after that. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable, but it was also honest. And that, at least, was something I could hold on to. A few days passed, and the weight of the conversation with Emma hung over me like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. I had been waiting for the right moment to confront my parents, but every time I looked at them, I couldn't shake the feeling that nothing had changed. They were still the same people who had betrayed me, still the same people who had decided my future didn't matter as much as Emma's. The house felt smaller with each passing day. I could hardly breathe without remembering the conversations I'd overheard, the arguments between my parents, the constant reminders that Emma needed more and I needed to understand. The past kept creeping into every moment, suffocating me. It was late one evening when I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the empty mug in my hand. I had been absent, lost in thought for hours. I didn't know what I was doing anymore, what I was trying to hold on to. I was trapped between the life I had once known and the one I had built for myself. The memories were too painful, yet they were all I had. I couldn't outrun them. I heard footsteps behind me, and I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. It was Dad. He had always been the one to reach out first, the one to soften the blows when Mum's words were too sharp. I wasn't sure if that was comforting or just another reminder of how little he had ever really understood me. "Lily," he said, his voice quiet but firm, like he was trying to make himself heard over the years of silence. "We need to talk." He felt the old, familiar rush of anger rising in my chest. Talk? After everything? I wasn't sure I had it in me to listen to whatever excuses they had for themselves. But I didn't say anything. I just stood there, feeling the heat of his gaze on my back, the weight of his expectations pressing down on me. I had never been able to avoid these moments, these conversations that always seemed to circle back to the same tired arguments. "Know you're upset, Lily," Dad continued, his voice thick with something I couldn't quite place. "And I know we made mistakes, but we did what we thought was best for everyone. It wasn't about choosing one over the other. It was about keeping this family together." I felt my jaw clench, my hands tightening around the mug. How could he stand there and say that? How could he act like all of this was for the good of the family when he had torn us apart? "Dad," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "You didn't keep this family together. You broke it. And you didn't even ask me how I felt before you made those decisions. You never thought about what I needed. Not once." He was silent for a long time, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, like the words were coming from somewhere deep inside him. "I'm sorry, Lily. I really am. But I want you to understand something. We did this because we believed Emma had the potential to do something extraordinary. We thought we could give her the chance we didn't give you. That was the problem, wasn't it? They had always treated Emma like she was the one who needed the most help, the most attention, the most resources. And in the process, they had overlooked me. I wasn't the one who needed saving, but they had never cared enough to see that. They had just assumed that I would always be there, waiting quietly in the background, ready to accept whatever crumbs were left for me. "You gave her everything," I said, finally turning to face him. "And I had to fight for every scrap of attention, every bit of recognition. And now, I'm supposed to just come back and forgive you? Like none of this matters?" Dad's face fell, a mixture of guilt and frustration crossing his features. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel invisible. You've always meant so much to me, both of you. But the truth was, those words didn't mean much anymore. They were just words. Words I had heard before. Words that had never really changed anything. The damage had been done. The years of neglect, the years of being told I wasn't enough, it had all led me to this point. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did." For a moment, there was nothing but silence between us, the air thick with the weight of unspoken things. I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell him how much I had suffered, how much I had changed because of what they had done. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Not yet. Finally, Dad sighed, looking older than I remembered. "I understand," he said softly, "but I hope someday you'll see that we only ever wanted what was best for you." I didn't answer. I didn't know if I ever could. The days that followed were quieter, but I wasn't sure if it was a sign of peace or just the calm before the storm. After Dad's words in the kitchen, I hadn't known how to respond. I didn't know how to fix everything that had broken between us, or if fixing it was even possible. Instead, I threw myself into work, the one thing that I could control, the one thing that felt solid, real, and free of expectations. The apartment I'd rented for myself had always been a symbol of independence, of escaping the ties that had once bound me to my family. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for now, that was all I needed. I woke up early each morning and threw myself into projects, making contacts, building my career in ways I'd never thought I could before. I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to prove that I didn't need anyone's help to do it. It was more than ambition. It was a need to assert myself, to finally show that I was capable of achieving something on my own terms. But despite the distraction, I couldn't shake the feeling of being haunted by the past. It clung to me like a shadow, lurking behind every decision, every success. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung anymore, it was the absence of closure. I had left without saying goodbye, without truly confronting my parents. Maybe, in some way, I thought that would help me heal, but it hadn't. Instead, it felt like there was an unfinished chapter in my life that I couldn't quite let go of. Then, one evening, the phone rang. I'd been standing by the window, watching the fading light of day dip below the horizon, when I picked it up. It was Emma, the one person I hadn't heard from since the day I left. "Lily, it's me," she said, her voice fragile but familiar, the same softness that had once made her so easy to care for. "I know it's been a while, but I think we need to talk." I felt a tightness in my chest, a sense of inevitability. I wasn't ready for this. But then again, when would I ever be? "What is it, Emma?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. The last time we'd spoken, we hadn't exactly parted on good terms. I didn't know where we stood now. "I'm sorry," she said, her words coming out in a rush, like she was trying to get them out before she lost her nerve. "I know I never really understood. Well, everything that happened. I was too focused on my own life. But I don't want to lose you, Lily. I don't want us to be strangers anymore." The weight of her apology hung in the air between us, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. Part of me wanted to snap at her, to let the anger I'd been holding back for years spill out all at once. But there was something else in her voice, something raw and real. "I didn't ask for everything that happened," Emma continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't choose for things to turn out like this, but I never meant to hurt you, and I know I did. I want to make it right if I can." The old wounds flared up, but I held back my tears. I wasn't sure how to forgive, how to let go of the resentment that had built up over time. It was like a wall had formed between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break it down. "I don't know how to make sense of all of this, Emma," I said, finally letting out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can go back to how things were. I don't know if I can forgive you." For a long moment, there was only silence on the other end. Then Emma spoke, softer now, almost pleading. "I don't want you to forgive me, not yet. I just want you to know I'm here. I always will be." Her words hung in the air, and I felt the weight of them more than anything else she had ever said. She didn't want me to forgive her. She just wanted me to know that she was there. That somehow, after everything that had happened, we could still be sisters. I didn't answer right away. What could I say? There was so much to untangle, so much to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I felt a spark of something other than anger. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was just the first step towards something new. I didn't know yet. "I'll think about it," I said finally, the words feeling like an answer to a question I wasn't sure I could ask myself. "But I'm not ready yet, Emma. Not yet." "I understand," she replied, her voice steady, even though I knew she had to be holding back tears. "Just know that I'm here when you are." And with that, the conversation ended. I sat in silence, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Could I really find a way to move forward from all of this? Could I let go of the past and allow myself to heal? Maybe, just maybe I could, but only on my own terms. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand, a familiar ringtone I couldn't ignore. It was a Saturday morning, and I'd planned to spend the day catching up on work, maybe even a little self-care. But the moment I picked up the phone and saw the name on the screen, everything changed. It was Dad. I hesitated for a moment, the weight of the years between us heavy in my hands. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend like the past didn't exist and that I didn't owe him anything. But then there was the part of me, the one I'd buried deep down, that still longed for answers, still yearned for some form of resolution, even if it meant facing the pain again. I took a deep breath before answering. "Lily," Dad's voice came through, rough with emotion, but still unmistakably his. "I know you've been through a lot, and I understand why you left. But I need to talk to you. Please." I let his words settle before responding. The anger that had once been my constant companion had simmered down, replaced by something more complex. Wounded pride, maybe, but there was still something in me that wanted to hear him out. Maybe I owed myself that much. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I don't know where to begin," he sighed, the words thick with regret. "But I need to apologize for everything. For the way we handled things with you, for the way I failed you as a father. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try." I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hand through my hair as I processed his words. It wasn't just the apology that hit me. It was the realization that, deep down, I'd been waiting for this moment. I'd been hoping for an apology, even when I wasn't sure what it would change. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure how to feel about it. "Dad," I said after a long pause, "I don't know if you can fix anything. You took my future from me, and that's not something you can just undo with a few words." "I know," he said quietly, "but I also know I hurt you, and I'm sorry for that. You've been carrying this for so long, and I can't take that pain away. But I'm here, Lily. I always will be, and I want to make it right, in any way I can." His words were honest, and maybe for the first time in a long time, I could hear the sincerity in his voice. But did that change anything? Could an apology heal the wound of years lost, of a dream shattered? Could I, after all this time, let go of the resentment that had kept me distant from him? I didn't have the answers, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep running from it. I couldn't keep pretending like I didn't need to face the past, even if it meant confronting all the pain that came with it. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad," I said finally. "But I'll think about it. I will. I just need some time." "I understand," he said, his voice softer now. "But I hope you know that I'll be here when you're ready, no matter how long it takes." I sat there for a while, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat in the silence that followed. It was a strange feeling, to be caught between the past and the future. A part of me wanted to shut everything out, to hold on to my anger as a shield, but another part one that I hadn't let out in years, was reaching for the possibility of something better, something real. I ended the call, but I didn't hang up in anger, as I might have years ago. I wasn't sure where we stood, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could figure it out. Later that day, Emma called again, a follow-up to our earlier conversation. "You talked to Dad?" she asked, her voice tentative. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "I did." And? It's complicated," I replied. "I'm not sure what comes next, but we're talking. That's a start, right?" Emma was quiet for a moment before answering. "It's more than a start, Lily. It's a step. I'm proud of you." I wasn't sure if I was proud of myself, but the truth was, it felt good to let the walls down a little, to not carry all of this on my own anymore. Maybe this was the first step toward healing, or maybe it was just the beginning of a longer, harder journey. Either way, I wasn't running anymore. For the first time, I could see a path forward. Not just as the girl who had been wronged, but as the woman I was becoming. And maybe, just maybe, that woman was ready to face her past. It had been a few weeks since the call with Dad, and things felt different. Oddly heavy, like a layer of dust had settled on everything I thought I knew. I kept waiting for the world to shift, for some grand moment where everything would make sense again. But nothing came. The quiet that followed his apology felt more unsettling than any confrontation we'd ever had. I tried to focus on my work, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that conversation. Could I really forgive him? Could I let go of the years of disappointment, the weight of betrayal? I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. That afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a cafe, staring at my phone. I had just received a message from Emma, one that simply read, "Dad's coming to the city this weekend. He wants to see you. Are you ready for that?" The question hit me like a punch in the gut. Ready? How could I be ready for something like that? I hadn't seen him in years, not since I'd walked out of their house, too angry to even look back. I didn't know what to expect. I wasn't sure what to feel either. Part of me wanted to refuse, to stay hidden behind the life I'd built without them. But another part of me, one I couldn't quite name, wanted to see him, to understand. If the man on the phone was the same man I remembered, the one who had let me down so completely. I glanced up at the cafe window, watching people inside as they went about their day. Their lives seemed so simple, so unaffected by everything I was carrying. I envied that. I wondered if I'd ever get to a point where I could move through the world without feeling like a stranger in my own skin. The phone buzzed again, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Dad. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Lily?" His voice was tentative, like he was testing the waters, unsure whether to tread lightly or to dive right in. "I know this is probably unexpected, but I wanted to see if you'd be open to meeting this weekend. I don't want to push you, but if you're ready, I'd like to talk in person." I stood there staring at my reflection in the glass. I was struck by how much had changed, not just in me, but in him too. The man I'd known before was a shadow of who he used to be. And in some strange way, I had become a version of myself I wasn't sure I recognized anymore. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though I could feel my pulse quickening. "I need some time." "I understand," he said softly, his voice full of understanding I hadn't expected. "I'll be here when you're ready. Take your time, Lily." I ended the call and put my phone back in my pocket. I wasn't sure what had just happened. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. All I knew was that, somehow, I had to face him. I had to face the man who had shaped so much of who I was, and who I'd tried so hard to leave behind. But the truth was, I wasn't just facing him, I was facing everything I'd left unresolved in my life. The anger, the hurt, the expectations I'd grown up with, the weight of what I'd sacrificed. It was all coming to a head now. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to face it, to see where it would take me. The weekend came faster than I expected. The city had that crisp early autumn air, the kind that made everything feel like a fresh start, even if I didn't entirely feel ready for one. I'd been staring at the same spot on my desk for the better part of the morning, unsure of how to prepare myself. What does one wear for something like this? What do you even say when everything you thought you knew about someone has been erased, replaced with years of silence? I tried to make sense of it all, of how I ended up here, standing on the edge of what felt like an emotional precipice, but no answers were forthcoming. Instead, I found myself distracted by old memories, things I thought I'd packed. Away long ago, the smell of Dad's aftershave in the mornings, his laugh echoing through the kitchen, the way he used to tell me that anything was possible as long as you had the right mindset, how easily those words had come to him, yet now, they felt like a lie. I knew the time had come. There was no more running, no more pretending that I could just keep living my life as if nothing had happened. I reached for my phone and saw the message from Emma. "Dad's looking forward to seeing you. Just wanted you to know that." I stared at the words for a long time. How was I supposed to feel? What did I want from this? There was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was a different kind of knock, soft, hesitant. The kind you hear when someone's unsure whether or not they've overstayed their welcome. I opened the door, and there he was. Dad. He looked different. I don't know what I had been expecting, but it wasn't this. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his hair thinner, but there was something else too. Something that, for the first time in a long while, made him seem human again. He was no longer the figure I had once seen as an authority in my life, but a man who had grown older, perhaps wiser, certainly more fragile. "Lily," he said. His voice cracked as if saying my name after so many years held more weight than he'd anticipated. "I wasn't sure if you'd come." "I wasn't sure either," I said. It was honest, and strangely enough, it didn't feel cold. I hadn't expected to say anything like that. I hadn't expected to be so vulnerable. We stood there for a moment, neither of us knowing exactly what to do next. Then he stepped forward, a cautious hand extended as if he wasn't sure I would take it. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I've spent these years regretting it, regretting losing you." I didn't know what to say. For years, I had been angry. So angry I couldn't even look at him, let alone hear an apology. But now, standing face to face with him, the anger didn't feel as sharp as it once had. Instead, it felt like an old wound, one that had finally begun to heal on its own. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "But I'm here." He nodded, looking like he had expected this answer, but the sincerity in his eyes told me something else. He was trying to make up for the years, for the broken trust, for the family he'd torn apart with a few decisions. "I never wanted to hurt you, Lily. I hope one day you'll understand that." I stood there for a long time, staring at him, weighing my options. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something I could just give. Not yet. Maybe it wasn't about that. Maybe this was just the beginning of a different kind of relationship, one built on new terms, new boundaries. "I don't know if I can understand," I finally said, "but I'll try." We both stood there in silence, the weight of those words settling between us. It wasn't a resolution, it wasn't closure, but it was something I hadn't thought I would get from this meeting. It was a beginning. The drive back to my parents' house was quiet. The streets seemed strangely familiar, and yet everything felt new. I passed landmarks that had once meant something. Shops, parks, even the old diner where I used to meet Emma after school. And now, they seemed irrelevant, distant, like they belonged to someone else's memory. By the time I reached their front door, my chest was tight, and I could feel the familiar unease creeping back in. It was almost like stepping back into the role I had played for years. The dutiful daughter, the one who kept her head down, tried to please everyone, the one who never asked too much. That girl had disappeared, but the world outside seemed to still expect her to show up. When I walked inside, I was greeted by the warm scent of dinner. My mother was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. Her back was turned to me, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. She looked the same as she always had, soft, nurturing, maybe a little tired, but still so unmistakably her. "Lily," she said without turning around. Her voice carried a strange mix of surprise and hope. "You're here. I'm glad you came." "I didn't know what else to do," I replied, my voice thick with the weight of what I was feeling. She turned to face me, her expression softening when she saw the uncertainty in my eyes. "I know it's been hard, darling. We've been through a lot." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked around the room, letting my eyes fall on the things that were once so familiar. Framed family photos on the walls, the old rug on the floor, the mismatched cups in the cupboard. It was all the same, but it felt foreign now. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said. The words were blunt, but they felt true. "Not yet. I can't just pretend that everything's fine." My mother's face fell, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. But she didn't argue. She never had. Instead, she crossed the room, her hand reaching out to me. "I never wanted to take anything from you, Lily. I wanted to see you go to college. I wanted you to have the world at your feet." "But you didn't give me that chance," I said, stepping back slightly. "You didn't give me the chance to make that choice." She sighed, and for the first time, I saw the exhaustion in her. The kind of exhaustion that only came from years of pushing down guilt, from pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm sorry. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't." I nodded. "I know you can't, but that doesn't make it okay." We stood there in silence for a long while. My father had retreated to the living room, probably trying to give us space, though I could feel his presence looming in the background. The air between us was thick with years of unresolved tension, things unsaid, and promises broken. Finally, my mother spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you want from us, Lily?" I wasn't sure. The answer wasn't as clear as I'd hoped. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand that they understand everything they'd taken from me. Another part of me just wanted to leave again, to walk out the door and never come back. But there was a third part of me, the part that had been buried for so long, that just wanted to heal. Maybe not now, maybe not with them, but eventually, I wanted to move forward. "I want honesty," I said, my voice steady. "I want to stop pretending. I want to stop being the person you want me to be and start being the person I want to be." My mother didn't say anything for a moment. I could tell she was weighing my words, trying to understand them in a way that didn't feel like rejection. When she finally spoke, there was a kind of resigned acceptance in her tone. "I understand. I hope that one day you can see that we did what we thought was best." "I know you did," I said quietly. "But that doesn't mean..." It was right. There was a long pause before she spoke again. "So, what happens now?" "I don't know," I answered. "But I think this is a start." The silence that followed felt less suffocating, more like the beginning of something new. Something uncertain, yes, but also something with a possibility of change. I spent the next few days at my parents' house, though it was anything but peaceful. Every conversation felt like a slow unraveling of something fragile, the tension growing with each passing hour. It was as if we were all waiting for a bomb to go off. The air was thick with things left unsaid, and I was starting to realize just how much of my life had been spent tiptoeing around the truth. It was easier when I didn't have to face the past. When I was on my own, I could push the memories of disappointment, frustration, and hurt into a box and lock it away. But now that I was back, in this house, surrounded by the people who had shaped me into who I had become, I couldn't help but face the reality of everything I had been avoiding. At dinner that night, I tried to eat, but my appetite had abandoned me. I couldn't focus on the food or the conversation. My mind kept circling back to the same question. Why did you do it? Why did they take my future from me, and for what? My father, usually quiet at meals, cleared his throat as he looked at me across the table. "Lily, we never meant to hurt you." "I know you didn't," I replied, my voice flat. "But the damage is done." He shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know what you want me to say, sweetheart. We made mistakes. But we did what we thought was right at the time. Your sister was in a tough spot. We couldn't leave her without help." "But you didn't even think about me," I countered, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "You didn't think about what it would cost me. You made the decision for me, without asking, without even telling me. It wasn't just money you took, it was my future." My father's face tightened. "We did what we had to do. You'll see, in time. I've seen it, Dad. I've seen the result." My voice shook with frustration, but I didn't care anymore. I needed them to understand. "I'm not some charity case. You didn't have the right to take that from me. I worked hard for that scholarship. I earned that. And you threw it away." My mother, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "We never meant to make you feel less than. You've always been so strong. You were always the one who tried to make things right. We thought you'd understand why we did what we did, why we put Emma first." "I didn't understand then, and I don't understand now," I said, feeling the anger rising in my chest. "I've spent years resenting you both for this, and now that I'm back, I still feel that same resentment. I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know if it can be fixed." For a long time, there was nothing but silence. My parents looked at each other, their faces full of regret. They didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what I wanted from them. It was like we were all standing at the edge of a cliff, staring at the distance between us. Finally, my father spoke again, his voice softer. "We're sorry, Lily. We're sorry for everything." But even as he spoke, I realized that their apologies weren't enough. They couldn't erase the years of sacrifice that had been demanded of me, nor could they erase the bitterness I had carried with me. I wasn't sure if they understood the depth of the hurt, or if they ever would. But one thing was clear. I couldn't go back to being the person I had been. I couldn't go back to the girl who waited for permission to be something more. I stood up, pushing my chair back from the table. My parents both looked at me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and worry. "I can't do this," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "I need to leave again. I need to figure this out on my own." "But Lily," my mother stood up too, her face pale, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "Please don't go. Not again. Please don't leave us like this." "I don't know how to stay, Mum," I said, my throat tight. "I don't know how to stay here and pretend everything's fine. I'm not that person anymore. I can't be." I turned and walked out of the room before either of them could say anything else. As I stepped into the cool evening air, I felt the weight of the past few days pressing down on me. The anger was still there, the frustration, the hurt. But beneath it all, something else was stirring. Something I couldn't name yet. For the first time, I felt like I was truly on my own. And in that moment, it felt like freedom. It had been a week since I left my parents' house, a week of silence between us, save for the occasional text from my mother, each one more pleading than the last. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the way I had been. The anger had morphed into something more difficult to manage, a kind of deep sorrow. I had to protect myself, and that meant keeping my distance. I had found a small apartment in a neighborhood I could afford, but not love. The walls were thin, and the heating system wasn't great, but it was mine. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a reminder that this was real, that I had created something from nothing. I was carving out a space for myself, and that was all I could focus on. I had spent so many years bending to other people's expectations, and now it was time to do something different. It was time to live for me. I spent the days buried in work, taking on freelance projects that kept me busy. When I wasn't working, I was reading or thinking or writing in a journal that had become my closest confidant. The loneliness of it all wasn't lost on me, but I had come to terms with it. I had known that I would be alone for a while. It was part of the price I had to pay for freedom. And at least now, when I was alone, I had my own thoughts to keep me company and no one else's. Then, one evening, as I sat on my small balcony with a glass of wine, the doorbell rang. I hadn't been expecting anyone, so I stood up and walked to the door, wondering who it could be. When I opened it, I was face to face with my sister, Emma. She looked different. There was something about her that made me hesitate before I said anything. She was thinner than I remembered, and there was a tiredness in her eyes that spoke volumes. She smiled weakly when she saw me. "Hey," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, allowing her to come in. She stood there for a moment, surveying the space with an almost mournful expression. It wasn't like her to be quiet, to seem so broken. "Is everything okay?" I asked, the words coming out before I could stop them. She nodded slowly, then exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for a long time. "I don't know. I don't think I'm okay. I don't know if I've ever really been okay." I waited for her to continue, but she remained silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never really understood what you were going through. Not until recently. I was so focused on my own life, my own problems, that I didn't see how much you were struggling. I didn't see how much you were giving up. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they hit me like a wave crashing over me. All this time I had thought she didn't care. I had blamed her for everything. But here she was, standing in front of me, offering something I hadn't expected. Understanding. I took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. "I don't know how to fix everything, Emma. I don't know if I can forgive Mom and Dad for what they did. I don't know if I can go back to being the person I was before." "You don't have to go back," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't have to forgive anyone. But I think you should know that you don't have to carry all of this by yourself anymore. I know I didn't show it before, but I'm here now. I want to help." Her words were like a balm to my wounded soul. For the first time in so long, I felt like I wasn't alone in this battle. It didn't make everything better, but it was a start. I took a long look at my sister, seeing her in a way I never had before. She was still my sister, the one who had been there for me when I needed her as a child, even if I hadn't always seen it. And now, in this moment, I realized something important. I had to stop running from my past, from my family, and from the pain I had been carrying. It wasn't about forgiving them for everything. It wasn't about going back to who I had been. It was about moving forward, knowing that I could choose my path, and I could build a life that was truly my own. "I'm not sure what comes next," I said, my voice steady now, "but I think I'm ready to find out." Emma nodded, a small, knowing smile on her face. "Then let's do it together." As we sat there talking late into the night, I realized that maybe the most important part of moving on was knowing that I didn't have to do it alone. I had changed, yes, but I was still capable of love, of understanding, and of hope. And for the first time in a long while, I felt ready for whatever came next.